And if you get major objections when you're trying to close an order, I totally agree, Tony.
Yeah.
You've screwed up earlier in the process.
Ken?
Yes, you have screwed up earlier in the process.
We're ready to go?
Yep.
So you've kept the best for last, something controversial.
I have. So the thing I wanted to talk about is the whole topic of objections. So I know when I first got into sales, I'm going to sound old now, like 30 years ago or something, I was taught that objections are opportunities to close. And I formed the view that that's just not the case. My opinion is that objections, more often than not, are evidence for the seller that they've made a mistake. They've sought commitment or progression when they don't really understand and the customer's not ready. And if you push people without understanding properly, I think you damage trust and actually slow things down. I'd be interested to hear your guys'
So before
view.
we shout you down, can you just give me an example of an objection that meets that criteria, that sort of fits the bill?
You're going to shouting down, are you?
Yeah, well, I am. I personally am, but
I was ready to fire too.
okay.
For example, asking for access to the person's boss or asking them to make the commitment to purchase, right?
But is that and them saying no to that?
They're saying, well, no, we don't have the budget approved yet,
right?
So to me, but if they go, what in the world are you doing asking for me to commit when if you'd taken the time to ask about my timing and process, you would have understood I've got to go away and put a business case up and I've got to get the budget approved to spend it. So why are you asking for me to commit?
So your definition of objection then is at the time of close.
I think an objection is when someone negatively pushes back on a request that you're making, right? In a way that damages trust.
So I think that is a very narrow view of what constitutes an objection. I think that's absolutely one form of objection, and I think there's a whole lot of objections which you could broadly put under the banner of you either haven't done a great job, or you've been unprofessional, or you've pushed the process too quickly, or something else which pertains to sales execution on behalf of the salesperson. So I think there's a bucket of objections which fit into that, absolutely. Then I think there's a whole lot of very, very reasonable objections or questions or obstacles which crop up through any natural sales cycle where they're look, I've got some concerns about implementation time, or we've had an issue in the past with an implementation that's caused this to happen, or whatever it might be. And my personal perspective on that is that that's an opportunity for us to address something which would have held up the sales cycle, and then hopefully progress it if we do a good job of addressing it. Because I think we talk about objections, but there's all these hidden objections where customers maybe have it in their mind, but they're not necessarily calling it out to us. And I think a really important role as a salesperson is to dig for those hidden objections. Right? But, what am I missing? Yeah. What have we not answered? Help me understand where you have some concerns. Because if those objections aren't brought to the surface and addressed, then they at very least will slow things down, if not stop it completely.
So this may be semantics, but what I'm hearing is you discovering concerns that they've got, and I don't regard that as an objection.
Well, I think then it is semantics, or it's a terminology issue, because traditionally what we're calling, what you've just called concerns on behalf of the customers about the process, have often fallen under the remit of objections.
Yeah.
And I think that might be an important distinction. Anything which is in the customer's mind, which is a concern, which could slow down the sales cycle, I've broadly coupled under the term of objection.
And that's my definition.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that definition. And therefore it doesn't fit your definition.
No, I regard objections when people push back on us when we're seeking to close or we're seeking progression.
Yeah.
I don't categorize uncovering concerns or difficulties.
And I will agree with you that if you got to the final commitment and somebody has pushed back and said, "Woo, hang on a second, we haven't got the budget" or something.
Yeah.
Then you've made a mistake. You haven't addressed what you needed to address through the sales process, through discovery and value creation and so on.
Because you shouldn't be asking. You shouldn't be asking if you know they
No,
can't.
you're closing. Yeah. You're not ready to close.
And so I think it's a really, really important distinction. Whatever terminology we use, whether you call it concerns, which is different to objections, or whether you couple them all under objections, one of the things that I've observed, when you want to establish trust in a relationship, you can have a really strong answer to questions that often get raised, right? And that often speaks to trust. But you can go a step further and you can raise those issues yourself.
Yes.
You can say, look, to be honest, people often have concerns about the size of the upfront investment or the length of the implementation or risk around this. So you can raise those questions yourself and then do a really good job of addressing them, which knocks them out of
Yes.
the customer's mind, but also then instills trust and a sense of openness for them to ask you other questions, because they think you're not hiding stuff. You're calling out some of the concerns we had. So we can feel quite comfortable, because we need to create an environment where they're comfortable to do that.
But you're not always going to be able to do that. They will raise something that you haven't thought of, or you just haven't got to yet.
Yep.
So in that situation, you do have an issue. How do you address it? I mean, in my case, I think it's really, really important that we respect the individual and the fact that they are raising a question of value for them.
Yeah.
And we need to really understand it. Even if we sit here and think, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is just give him an answer. Right?
Let me give you an example of how I think about this. I've done work with a bunch of recruiting companies, and we all know that hiring managers get bombarded by recruiting companies. And the common objection or excuse for denying access to the recruiter is, I'm too busy to meet with all of the recruiters that are calling me. So you've either got a candidate or not, send me their CV. That's the most common objection, I'm too busy. What I say to recruiters is, if you get that objection, like if that stops you, then you're an amateur in how you sought to approach the person. So know that that's going to be a concern, and say, I know you're busy, but that's why I think it makes sense to get together. 20 minutes with me can give you back 8 to 10 hours in your hiring process and dramatically de-risk it. How's your calendar next week? So if you know you're going to get the objection of, I don't have time to meet with recruiters, make them being time poor the reason to meet.
But then you've done something really interesting there, Tony, which is you've reverse engineered from the objection to your approach, right?
Yes.
So you've done, how am I going to make my first impression, recognizing the likely objections that will occur. And I think that's where the professional and sales professional comes from. It's understanding what the likely objections are, and then having a process that either gets out ahead of that or positions it in a way that says, I recognize that you're incredibly busy, as are all of the other hiring managers. Why the hell would you want to put some time in your diary for me? You don't know me at all. Let me get out ahead of that and give you a really compelling reason as to why to do that. And I think that is critical. It's learning from the objections we get and asking ourselves, how could I do that better next time around?
Yeah.
Testing and improving our process, rather than just saying, well, here's our FAQ, or, that's a good point, sorry for disturbing you. There needs to be a parity. Yes, their time is important. Yes, their time is valuable. So is our time, right? So I don't want to waste my time talking to you if it's not going to be a good conversation for you or for me. So how do we level set that at the very start? And I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Great point. But the same thing applies right through the sales process. When you're already in there, you need to be thinking about what's like.
Anticipate.
Anticipation is absolutely critical. And both of you have raised that, and as much as possible. And then know how you're going to address it. So all the pre-planning, and this should become second nature, because the objections or the concerns and issues are common from customer to customer to customer, or 80% of them are.
That's right.
So you know exactly how to handle these, and you can anticipate, you can forecast them, and make sure you nail it before it actually is raised.
Can I just share a really quick story? So I did some work with an organization, and they had a new salesperson who joined, who came from a customer, had never sold before. I'm not sure if I've shared this story with you before. And he made a comment which really interested me. He said, look, I'm really worried about, transitioning to sales. I haven't done sales before, but I really understand the buying process. I just, don't understand the selling process. I was like, well, that's really interesting, because the buying process is the one that's hard. Yeah. So what we did was we, got him to sort of capture, in a relative level of detail, here's the steps of the process we go through when we're making a buying decision. So then we mapped that up against here's the steps of the selling process, which is good, right? Not great, but good. But then he did something which was really interesting. He took those two one-page documents, and when he goes in and sits down with a prospect, he puts them on the table and he says, look, I just wanted to get an understanding of your buying process. This tends to be, kind of the process that some of our, but how does that stack up with you? And by the way, this is the kind of the process we go through on our side while you're doing your stuff. So we've created this common language. And as a result, a lot of the objections which crop up, where I'm asking you to send me some information because I need that in order to progress internally, to get access to resources or to unlock a pre-sales person, have gone away because all of there's a common understanding around what are the steps of the process. For us to do this, I'm going to need you to do that. So if you're not there yet, that's okay, but then I can't move on to this step.
Yeah.
And that just was like a light bulb. I was like, why aren't we doing this more often? Why aren't we opening the kimono a little bit to our customers and saying, we have a process, you have a process, can we get that kind of mapped?
So can I be really cheeky? We started with you guys disagreeing with me. It sounds like you agree. There's a way of being more professional and heading a lot of objections off at the pass.
I think my disagreement was around terminology. I think, the nuance between objections and concerns.
Okay.
But you raised a really good point, which is a lot of the objections are objections that we cause through our actions rather than something that's
legitimate.
Legitimate, absolutely.
I agree. I I still do it. I did one the other day, and I just hadn't thought it through. And that's the important thing in planning every call you make with a customer, ensuring that you plan to create value through the conversation, and you plan how they may respond or react, and you nail it off before they actually have to raise it.
Can I finish up the conversation with a real example that's exactly on point with what you've just said? One of my clients that I work with found that almost all of the prospects they approach have got an existing supplier that they're already working with. So that was the common objection. We've already got a supplier that we're happy with. So I said, well, rather than getting that as the objection, let's reverse engineer it and say, hey, I'm aware you've already got a supplier that you're working with. What we commonly find in the marketplace is that those long-term, comfortable relationships rarely provide the right level of value for you, the customer. I'm not sure when the last time was that you benchmarked, but I'd be happy to share some of those benchmarks with you. When can we find 20 minutes? So rather than getting the objection of we've already got a supplier, it's I know you've got a supplier. We commonly find that means you're not getting the right level of value. If it's long-term and comfortable, I can share some benchmarking information with you. So you're just getting on the front foot.
It sounds like we all agree the best way to handle objections or concerns is nail them before they actually occur and get on the front foot. But if they do occur, you need to be ready to respond, and you need to have a very good way in which you respond to an objection that's constructive.
And we want to uncover negative things, we do. But we should only be seeking progression, especially at the end, based on understanding and having a level of alignment.
And if you get major objections when you're trying to close an order, I totally agree, Tony. You've screwed up earlier in the process.
Ken?
Yes, you have screwed up earlier in the process. No, I think we're all on the same page. Don't be the one to cause those issues, but create an environment where customers feel comfortable raising them with you, and then just be really honest in how you deal with them. And it moves the sales process forward if you can address these things, but it stalls it if you don't create an environment where people can ask the questions.
Great conversation. Yeah, thank you.